On a dark and stormy night, as raindrops mercilessly battered against the windows, Sarah found herself alone inside an old, creaking cabin. She had come here to escape the stresses of her daily life and find some peace, but tonight would be a haunting experience she would never forget. The cabin was situated in a remote location, miles away from any neighbors, isolated from society. The sole source of light was a flickering lamp, casting eerie shadows throughout the cabin. The rain was intensifying, making the night even more unsettling. Sitting by the fireplace, Sarah couldn't help but feel as if someone were watching her. Every rustle of the tree leaves and distant sounds seemed to hint at the presence of some whispering entity. Though she tried to convince herself that these thoughts were mere imagination, deep down, she knew something was amiss. Suddenly, the electricity went out, plunging the cabin into complete darkness. Sarah's heart began to race as she heard whispers in the darkness. The whispers were faint, almost indiscernible, but the only words she could clearly make out were, "Sarah, Sarah." Trembling with fear, she grabbed a flashlight. She felt that something was wrong. When she looked out the window, she saw the presence of a figure outside. It stood with its head shrouded in an old hood, peering into the cabin. She panicked and tried to step towards the door, but she froze. The figure outside still stood there, pointing at her with a long, bony finger. Sarah held her breath because the figure's lips were whispering her name in the darkness. She rushed to the bedroom, locked the door, and hid under the bed. Clutching her phone tightly, she tried to find a signal, but the deep forest offered no connectivity. The sound of the rain masked the approaching footsteps outside, and she couldn't hear the figure getting closer. Hours passed, and Sarah remained hidden, trembling with fear. She didn't know what was outside, but the anxiety was overwhelming. She heard the figure approaching the door. Then, everything suddenly stopped. The light came back on, the figure retreated, and the door closed. The cabin fell into silence, and everything returned to normal. When morning came, she mustered the courage to venture outside. She checked the cabin but found no traces. As she walked outside, she saw that the rainstorm had ended. Gathering her belongings, she locked the cabin door and left, leaving behind the terrifying memories of the night. After a few days, Sarah decided to return to the cabin just to check if anything unusual had happened. With newfound determination, she went back. The storm had passed, leaving a cleaned-up forest in its wake. The mysterious figure that had haunted her nightmares seemed to have vanished without a trace. Sarah walked toward the veranda in the quiet morning light, her footsteps echoing in the silence. As she ventured deeper into the forest, a chilling feeling crept over her. The path wound through ancient trees, their branches heavy with raindrops. As she walked further into the woods, a strange sense of déjà vu came over her. It felt like she had been here before, as if the forest was trying to communicate with her. The path eventually led her to a small clearing where an old, decrepit well stood. It was covered in moss and vines, its stone walls weathered by time. Sarah approached the well cautiously, a sinking feeling in her stomach. She couldn't understand how the figure from the night had come from here. She held her breath as she peered into the darkness of the well. At the bottom, partially submerged in the dark water, she saw remnants of a tattered cloak, much like the one the figure had worn. It was as if the figure had disappeared into the well, leaving behind only this eerie remnant. A cold shiver ran down Sarah's spine as she stepped away from the well. She knew she had to leave to put this terrifying experience behind her. After one last look at the well, she moved to leave the forest. Gathering her belongings, she decided she would never return to the cabin. The memory of that rainy night haunted her for years to come. To this day, the dark and enigmatic secret left behind by the mysterious figure remains a haunting memory, a nightmare she can never forget.